Thank you for joining us in today's Tech Talk. My name is Hampus Suomela. I'm a control room designer with the Control Room Solutions Group at ABB, currently based out of Houston, Texas. Next slide, please. Thank you. So today we're going to present operational effectiveness in today's changing environment, presented by Fiona Campbell. So just before, there's a little bit housekeeping on how to participate in today's event. So this screenshot you're seeing here is an example of the attendee interface. So you should be able to see something that looks like this on your own computer. The control panel hides automatically when not in use. So you need to move your cursor to bring it back. And also you have the opportunity to submit text questions to Fiona by typing your questions in the Q&A box of your attendee interface. So send in your questions at any time during the presentation. It will last approximately 30 to 35 minutes. So we'll collect all these and address them at the end of the presentation as well. So please submit your questions. So without further ado, we will turn over the control to Fiona Campbell. Our presenter today is ABB Senior Control Room Designer and Human Factors Expert. So Fiona, please, what will the audience learn today?
Thanks, Hampus. Just to give you an idea of the background a little bit, yeah, as Hampus says, I am a Senior Control Room Designer, Human Factors Expert. I've been with ABB now for the last 5 years, but I've been doing control room design for 25 years. I'm based in Canada, but I do cover all of North and South America as well. In terms of what we're going to cover today, the topic is operational effectiveness in today's changing environment. So we thought this would be a really good time to discuss this because of everything that's been going on, and also to give an idea of what we can actually do to help our customers out in this situation. So the agenda today, what I'm going to do is go over the current environment, the concerns, the considerations, human factors and ergonomics. Why is this important? How control room design is a critical part of it for your short and long-term planning. And the most important question is where to start. So I think just to begin, in the current environment, the key points nowadays, all of industry is deemed essential. Operations must continue, but potentially with reduced staff, there's an increased need for effective technology to work both on-site and remotely, and the need for operations staff to work even more efficiently processing info quickly and reliably. Employee health, obviously, and the ability to concentrate are also very important right now. Situational awareness is becoming more critical. So interestingly enough, there was a study that just came out that was published on April the 6th, and having specifically to do with COVID-19. And some interesting points came out of this. Well, actually, before I get to that, this study was done by the University of Houston. So it was actually based on data that they had collected between March 31st and I think it was March 30th and April 1st. At any rate, the key points that came out of it, 55% of respondents believe companies must invest even more in employee health and well-being. 27% that said they had trouble remembering instructions. 21% said they had trouble paying attention, which suggests potentially some safety risks. And the respondents saw the current situation as an opportunity to innovate, learn, and use technology to create an even more efficient system that serves industry and the public. So what we want to do now is, just out of curiosity, before we get into the rest of the presentation, we wanted to do a little poll. So what we want to cover with this poll is what you think are the most critical concerns you're facing right now in your control room. So during this environment, something to think about with regards to what might be the major issues that you think you might be facing, not necessarily just today, but in general. Although, again, today is the main focus, given that we are working in the type of environment that's a little bit different than what it used to be. So, these 4 key points, number one would be the operator's working environment, technology that needs to be updated, the control room itself is outdated, needs to be changed to suit today's requirements, and the workflow efficiency. So with regards to that, all these points can obviously be not just for today, but also for the future. So if you should have a poll that pops up on your screen, and if you get an opportunity to fill that out, that might be helpful so that we can get an idea of what the current feel is for the situation. So while we wait for that, one of the positives that's coming out of this current situation is it's actually, as difficult as it is, it's actually a really unique opportunity to streamline your efficiency and to maximize your operations. So despite all the stressors that are out there, it is really a good time to if you can take a step back and say, okay, now that we're in this situation and we need to be as efficient as we can and we want to make sure we're as safe as possible, it might actually give you the opportunity to look at some of the issues that were there before, but now they're becoming a little bit more obvious. One of the things that we do with control room design services, what we do is we identify key focus areas. So this is actually a really good way of helping you out when it comes down to it. We can prioritize what needs to be done first, and we've got solutions that can be implemented in a short period of time with long-term results. So looking at some of our poll results right now, interestingly enough, overall, the 2 key ones from the information that we have is that the control room is outdated, needs to be updated, and the workflow efficiency. So this is actually something that we focus on, and we're going to be able to help with as we go through this presentation, get a better idea of how we do it. So if we look at it today, we're in a new industrial era. New requirements on functionalities are there. Now, again, this is not just necessarily in today's current environment, but also overall. So overall, the control room can serve to do a lot of different things. In this case, specifically, if we look at it, we've got the operator consoles, we've got they're analyzing safety, analytics, cybersecurity, global monitoring, there's a meeting room, and all of these different areas are communicating with each other. So this is what a control room of the future is basically what we're focusing on. We want to make sure that we've got the ability to create an efficient information overview. We can consolidate multiple rooms if that's a requirement. We could do integrated operations to provide one room for dependent units. And we just want to make sure that we can streamline your operations. Fewer operators that are managing information, but in the most efficient way possible. And again, there's a lot of challenges that are out there, but challenges is opportunity. This is how we look at it. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, even in this situation, it really is giving you the ability to take a step back and look at your current operations and how you could be more effective and more efficient. So there's a variety of things at ABB that we can do. And we can get into that, but just some examples is we can improve graphics using HMI. We can connect to collaborative operational platform, get remote support from ABB experts. You could also consider MON, which is Manufacturing Operations Management. That gives you process and production intelligence, manufacturing execution systems, and production optimization. Generally speaking, we just want to make sure that we are able to take all the information that you need access to, enable you to access it remotely, as well as in normal operational situations. So what we want to do is improve the first time rates, shorten resolution times, and access to remote out-of-reach locations. And basically the key point here is taking as much information as we can and making it available to you and helping you get access to the information that you need and to increase the collaboration. So human factors and ergonomics. Why is this important? This is often overlooked in overall planning. It's a critical component. So there's 3 key areas that are impacted by human factors and ergonomics. One is the cognitive ability. So this is an individual's ability to process information quickly without missing critical information. The second is physical. So the ability to react quickly, to see the information, and an environment that increases alertness and reduces stress. So going back to that situational awareness that I was mentioning earlier, it's actually a really important point. The physical actually really does have an impact on how well the operator is able to react. And then, of course, the organizational. So the who, the how, and the why. Mapping the processes to determine the most efficient productivity and to identify gaps in the workflow, in just day-to-day operations. That's a critical point. So the combination of these three can be done through proper planning and proper control room planning and design. And again, going back to human factors ergonomics, why is it important? Because, and these numbers are a little bit outdated, to be honest with you. It's saying 5% on average global annual production is lost due to unscheduled downtime. 80% of unscheduled shutdowns are preventable, 40% of which are caused by humans. Interesting note here is that this 40% number is not exactly up to date. The last one I saw in the most recent publications and the most recent research that I've done is that it can be up to 80%. And if we think about it, most of the errors and any downtime can be directly related back to the human. So this is where we are a little bit different. What we do is we look at the control room as the absolute center of operational effectiveness. So the need for your operators to work efficiently is a priority. The ability to fine-tune your operations, so you want to make sure that they've got more responsibilities, but it allows for increased productivity, less downtime, fewer shutdowns, and a quick resolution of potential problems. Task analysis, again, a workflow process. This is a key element as part of the entire process. So when we look at control room design, we look at it specifically from the human. And the human is the one that we focus on when we're looking at effectiveness. It really has to come down to that. So the impacts on effectiveness, if we look at that, information overload. There's more information than ever before that needs to be processed. If you look at the definition of Industry 4.0, which is the fourth industrial revolution, this is a new era that builds and extends the impact of digitalization. Very, very key, important point. Digitalization is obviously a big tagline these days, along with the technology that needs to be done that goes along with it. Predictive maintenance, here's a couple of examples. So predictive maintenance systems, they can reduce plant maintenance costs by 8 to 12%. Eliminate, when the more important thing is, eliminate 70 to 75% of breakdowns and lead to production increases of 20 to 25%. And that's actually something really important as part of the process in making sure that things are running efficiently. Alarm management, this one's actually very interesting. If you think about it, what is your alarm management system like in your control room right now? It really should be a priority. The reason why I bring this one up is because it comes up often. We've got, a client right now, for example, that said, we had so many alarms going off in our control room that the operators just finally decided to turn them off. So they basically had, I think it was something like 300 alarms a minute that were going off. And the operator said, you know what, I can't focus on this, so we're just going to turn the entire alarm management system off, which obviously begs the question, okay, so how do they know if there's a real problem? Client says, well, we'll just get them to look at the screen. Right, okay, so what you're saying then is that you've got your operator that's monitoring 12 monitors, and the only way that he's going to know that there's an alarm going off is that if there's a red banner or something pops up. Client's like, yeah, we know, it's not really ideal. See, it's interesting, right? Talking to the operators, and the operators saying, yeah, it's actually very stressful, but it was more stressful listening to the alarm management. So that was another key one that actually comes up a lot that we hear about that should absolutely be a priority. HMI, that's actually a good point to pull up with the alarm management. The HMI graphics can make it easier to identify problems really quickly. So if you are able to have a good alarm management system, if you've got the right graphics on the screens, then the alarm system is going to put the notification up on the screen very quickly, and the operator is going to be able to respond. So again, human factors and ergonomics, and I'm going to repeat this a fair bit throughout this presentation because from our perspective and from our experience, it is absolutely critical. The technology keeps advancing, but the human doesn't. So with the human not advancing as quickly as the technology, then you've got to take a look at the best possible way to enable the operators or the humans that are in that control room to be able to respond. So if you look at it, this is just an example. What's the best way for an operator to process all the information? So when we look at this, this is an example of some of the screens that the operator has to follow when they're in the control room and at their console. And again, at ABB, we've got a variety of solutions that can make this even more efficient. So as I mentioned, the role of the human is being underestimated. No matter how advanced and effective technology is, there's always a human that must react. So what is the best possible way to do this effectively now and in the future? Control room design and planning. How can this help? So I'm not sure if you knew about this, but ABB has a control room solutions group, and that's the group that Hampus and I are part of, as well as our team that's based out of Sweden. And what we do specifically is we look at the operator effectiveness, and we specifically look at the control room design and the impacts on that. So the question is where to start. Well, we do have what we call control room design studies. And what this does is it's control room planning and operations. We do workshops, and we do these for a number of reasons. One is to identify key focus areas. So that is based on both operator and operational effectiveness. So we look at the operator and we look at the technology that they're having to analyze. We look at the information that they're having to analyze, and then we are able to identify priorities and create short and long-term plans for you to be able to run the most effective control room environment possible. We can help identify the pressing issues as well and solve them. And it also gives you access to the experts. So part of this process, the design study process, gives you the access to the experts that you need to be able to help you figure out what is the best solution for your most pressing technological needs, as well as the actual physical layout of the control room itself. And what we want to do from this is we want to create a sustainable action plan that can be implemented in phases. So it's not something that you necessarily have to do immediately. It doesn't have to be all done at once. What we want to do is go in, take a look at your current environment or what you're thinking of for your future environment, and come up with something that's going to work for you, both short-term and long-term. So a properly designed control room creates an environment that's safe, productive, engaging, healthy, collaborative, and technologically updated. The key points in here for us, from our perspective, have to do with the human. So interestingly enough, all of this goes right back to where the human is. We want the safety. We want to increase awareness, decrease fatigue. We want greater efficiency. We want to create a room where people want to work and are able to work very comfortably and very effectively. We want to make sure that it's also a healthy environment so that the operators are able to, feel comfortable, at least amount of stress as possible, and design for optimum ergonomics. Again, we want to focus also on the collaborative side. So we want to make sure that the operators are able to be communicating with who they need to be communicating with, and to minimize the number of people that are coming in and out of the control room environment. So the other option too is we also look at the ability to do remote operation centers, which is something that some of our clients do think about as well. So again, this also goes through a collaborative design process. So what we do is we talk to existing operators, we engage them, we allow for the more experienced operators to transfer information. We look at digitalization as part of this as well. Specific skills are required, therefore a specific environment is required. Task analysis, again, start by identifying one bottleneck and then analyze the processes used in this bottleneck and use it to implement the changes. So these are all things that we take into consideration when we're looking at control room design. So if we look at control room design guidelines in general, there are a lot of them that are out there, but there are some that are more important than others. And I think the key point here is when you look at the control room, you can't just look at it as a room that's holding technology and furniture. There's way more to it than that. So from the ABB standpoint, what we do is we look at it from a more holistic side, and we look at it specifically based on the human. Again, as I mentioned, this is gonna become perhaps a little bit repetitive, but it's because it's a really important point for us, and we think that it makes a huge difference when you're looking at your entire effectiveness and operational effectiveness. The key considerations are the best practice for 24/7 environment is to start with the operator and work outwards. So that basically means is you talk to the operators and you say, okay, what does the operator need to be doing and need to be looking at on a daily basis? And then how is the workflow? How is it working now? What needs to be changed? What do we need to think about in the future? What kind of technology is likely to come in the future that we need to be thinking about now that's going to actually impact the workflow? And then we want to look at the other thing is to look at short-term and long-term planning. It's going to save you money. If you do it right the first time, don't guess. Don't guess. That's going to cost you a lot in the long run. So the challenges that you're looking at are easily overcome if you think ahead, and we like to look at it as a very proactive way of doing it. So the key point in all of this is that when we do control room design, we look at it purely from, when we start with the operators, we work into the workflow, we look at the technology, we kind of take a step out of the box, and we have a really good idea objectively coming in as to what clients that we've had in the past, some of their issues, and we're able to apply that to existing operation centers as well as new ones that are being planned as well. So we do have this entire process in place that's actually thought out a little bit differently than than normal. We aren't architects. We aren't really interior designers either. What we are a specific group of experts that come in and say, okay, so in your control room, this is what you need to be thinking about, and this is why. So we have 3 different types of control room design. All of these can be completed remotely. So we don't need to necessarily be on site. I know the second one says on site, but in actual fact, we can do all of this remotely. And it really depends on the depth and the requirements of what you think you need and what you would like us to help you with. So generally speaking, overall, the way this works, this is just a very rough idea. We start with existing drawings and or photos if it's an existing control room. From there, we put together a questionnaire. So what we'll do is we'll take the information that you've got, we'll have conversations with you first, and then what we'll do is we'll come up with a questionnaire that's specifically focused on things that we see or that we see might be a problem and that we think we might be able to help you solve. From that, we then set up a workshop. So the workshop meaning we put together a project team with you as well as your operators and start to really get into a situation where it's an open conversation and the feedback. We ask the questions, we get the feedback, and we've got the ability to come up with a lot of data. From that, we analyze that data. We look at the human factors. We study, analyze everything that we've collected from you. We then go back and forth in multiple feedback loops. And from then, we'll come up with a design, and we'll go through a couple of conceptual designs with you in terms of how the room should be laid out based on what we've learned in the process as well. So just to get into that a little bit more in a little bit more detail, it allows for gathering of information that's not always obvious. And it may not always be obvious to you, and it may not be obvious to management, it may not be obvious to the operators, but when you all have the opportunity to sit down and have this type of environment and have this kind of workshop, it gives you the ability to share the information. So what we find with these design studies, and I've done a number of them, what usually happens is that things are identified that you might not have thought about initially. And we've actually had some clients where after going through the workshop portion of the design study, where they had to take a step back and put things on hold. So, for example, we had one client that did the design study, expected that they were going to be able to, and this was for a greenfield, expected they were going to be able to break ground and get things up and operational. Well, the information that came out of the workshop and the study for them ended up that they had to put their construction on hold for 6 months because they realized that they didn't have the proper workflow in place. They hadn't thought about the workflow. They were simply looking at, okay, we're just going to put these operators in a room and we'll put the desk and, give them a window and it's all good. But so, it's really actually very interesting because we can find out a lot in these, and it gives a lot, excuse me, a lot of really good feedback that you can then use now, but it also gives the opportunity to save it and use it in the future as well. So what we do is, again, we create a project team, we do the workshop interviews to gather the data, we analyze it, and we come up with a final design that includes results, recommendations, and in some cases, depending on what you're looking for in terms of depth, we can also come up with a final report for you, a written report that's going to say, hey, this is what you need to be thinking about, this is what your plan should be going forward, and these are the step-by-step process that you might want to consider. So the best thing that we do is we want to create a work environment that is using 5 key steps that follow ISO 11064. And again, that's the data collection, analyze it, come up with a conceptual idea, come back with a detailed design, and then we implement it. And the cool thing with us is that after we've done these studies and we've done a control room design, after we've implemented it, we will go back and we'll get the feedback, we'll make the tweaks that we need to make sure that you've got the ability to have exactly what you need to make sure that you're being really effective. The other good thing too, and something to think about, is that if you look at a control room, if it's done right, it can save you money in the long run. So if, for example, you are doing renovations either on an existing space or looking at doing a greenfield, we've got the ability to take a, say an architectural drawing such as this one, and then go through the workshop and go through the control room design and come up with a plan and come up with a solution that'll save you space and it'll also be much more effective for the workflow in this case. So if you look at this area here was what they were thinking they were going to need. In actual fact, it was, probably about 2/3 of the space was actually required, and this was going to provide a much more efficient solution for the client. Again, environment is the really, really important when it comes to being effective. You've got to really look at not just where the furniture is located, but you have to look at the interaction between the different areas. And this is not just in the control room. It's another point I wanted to mention. What we do is we look at areas that are adjacent to the control room area. So that might be, offices, engineering, management offices, anything else that's not necessarily physically in the control room, but should be adjacent to it or close to it. So we'll look at meeting rooms, we'll look at the kitchen areas, the break areas, where they are, how much traffic is coming in and out of the control room. Just to give an example of some of the things that we look at when we're doing this. So it really is comprehensive. It is not specifically on the furniture. And another key point in here is that traditional thinking in feed studies sometimes, many times actually, leads to outdated commodity thinking. So the feed study is one thing, but the earlier we get involved, the better it is, because that gives us a chance to really ask the questions and to really get a clear idea and help you get a clear idea of things you might not have considered as part of this. We want to make sure that when you're making any changes to your control room, you've got the ability to look at it today, but it's also going to give you something for the future. We really feel strongly that we don't want you to spend money where you don't need to. So what we want to do is make sure it's set up now, but it's also got the capability of expanding. So I'll give you a couple of examples in here. This is an example of a conceptual drawing that we did early on in the process. This is another one where we're in the middle of doing a conceptual design and a design study for a client. And again, this is where we get into the feedback part, where we ask questions and when we get the client's feedback of things that need to be changed. And this actually came up to be the end result for that one. And if we look at this one again, this is where we started with the architecture drawing. This was actually 2 or 3 concepts into it where we already changed some walls and moved some things around here. But we looked at a variety of different things. Like in this case specifically, they had their server cabinets in here, but the door wasn't big enough for them to get them in and out. That's one little thing. Again, they had the break room here, but they had the lock room, the door locks here to get into the control room. This client wanted visitors to be able to come in, and initially they wanted them to come in and walk through the control room. So we had discussed that with them about, you know, you don't want people just walking in a traffic flow through it. So as this one went along, we came up with a layout based on the data gathering that we had discussed in the workshop. Came up with a separate door. The door for the server racks now is at the other end and it's large enough for IT to be able to get in and out if needed. We added lockers, personal lockers for the operators. We gave them their own little break area in here so that everybody on the floor wasn't coming in and accessing, you know, their specific break area. And then the end result from that is that we also give visual renderings at the end. So visual renderings allows you to see the space and allows you to see how you think it's going to look. And it just basically, it sums up everything that we've talked about, and it is giving us the opportunity to look at the workflow, look at the workflow, look at the environment, look at the technology requirements. We have the ability to do this very early on in the process. We also have the ability to do it, you know, if you're just looking to do something right now while you need to make the changes, we can do that as well. And it, again, the key point is that we are extremely objective, and we want to make sure that we can be as helpful as possible. So ABB's Control Room Solutions Groups, that is what our focus is. We look at more than just the furniture. We look at the actual environment, we look at the workflow, we look at the operator, and our key focus is always going to be the human factor because of the fact, again, to repeat, it doesn't matter how advanced the technology is, it's always the human that has to react to it. So this has been our key focus when we do our design studies. And now I believe we are at the Q&A. So if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, just a reminder, everyone,